you touched on a couple of things right there that were top of mind for me. Those two particular moments, I would say the skip one being number one in terms of how
Mm,
strange it is for somebody coming off the very first year on the job, doing exactly what he was supposed to do in that job and have a team that exceeds expectations, to have him be recognized by the entire league as one of the best at what he does. And then within a few days of the season starting, you find out that he's on his way out, that
yeah,
the contract has been restructured, that a guy that is, you could quibble about how important a manager actually is and what they truly influence, but for somebody that was exactly what they seem to be looking for, and then for him to immediately now be have that hanging over the entire season,
mhm,
I would have to say that that really jumps out in terms of what I'll remember about this. Even for this team that has had so much turnover from
yeah,
managers, like that one angle to it, it was just so bizarre, and it just took this really unique set of circumstances for him to, as has been reported, for him to express his dissatisfaction with the change in the front office, and then for the team to actually, at the ownership level, to say, "All right, we see where you're coming from. Uh, we agree to like let you walk after this, even though you're under contract." So I think that is the one for sure. And with Arraez, it's especially the timing of it too, for it to
sure,
be so early in the season. You just do not see that so early, to concede that that this year is not that important, to
yeah,
flip somebody for all these players that could be part of your future, but definitely are not going to be part of your present season, for a guy that kind of like Skip is coming off the best season you could have possibly wanted from him the year before. And
yeah,
all of a sudden to be willing to turn around and move on from that.
yeah.
Absolutely,
No,
bro.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything else, Nate, along that vein that sticks out to you in terms of just storylines that really hung over this whole season?
Really just ushering in the new era, honestly. So many familiar faces, like Gabe pointed out. Jazz, who's been arguably the face of the franchise the past couple of years, he's gone. Luis Arraez, fan favorite, gone. And even before the season, I mean, losing like guys like Jorge Soler, that hurt. And just it's a whole new cast, honestly, a whole new bunch of top prospects. I'm definitely gonna remember the maybe not the players themselves, but how many players they actually use. Of course, they broke the record. Guys like I don't know Christian Pache, Darren McCacken, all these guys that maybe in a year or two I probably won't even remember they played on the team. But just the fact that Marlins just used so many players, and it shows what Peter Bendis is going to do to this team. Um, what else? It's just the start. Honestly, I think the month of March and April will definitely always stick out when I think about this team. Just the absolute brutal start that was. I mean, I thought this team. I predicted to win 80 games. It was probably some delusion mixed in there, but just how slow they started and how much of a gut punch really that first series against Pittsburgh and the following one against Los Angeles were. So yeah,
Yeah.
the word disappointment for sure sticks out, but also, like I said, the start of ushering in what is the Peter Bendis era now in Miami.
But even to go along with this, like you know, I talk to a lot of my own family now. They don't follow the Marlins maybe as much as we do. They're all from Miami. They all live in Miami, and the complaint is the same every time. Every time that we're going to the playoffs, get ready for the iconic guys to go. And I kind of feel like they sort of did the same thing. And so just that aspect of building the trust is yet again another issue. So yeah, you're right, Nate. Absolutely.
From Carver on the minor league side, there is one positive that really does stick out that I think people remember, and that's the breakout of Thomas White, somebody that we had regarded as one of the best prospects in this organization entering the year. But for him to take the leap that he has made into being one of the very best lefty pitching prospects in baseball, one of the best that this organization has ever had. With him, is there anybody else like on this minor league system that had this kind of breakout year that you think will stick with us and see it as the start of a pretty big major league career down the road?
Well, I think he has the biggest major league future, if that's your question. But I think there's other guys that really prove themselves. Like what Sanoja did this year is insane. To go from barely playing in Double A to Triple A and now to the major leagues where he's still hitting pretty well. That's crazy. As a 22-year-old kid, that's insane. So I think what Sanoja did should stick out, even if he doesn't have the major league future of a starting player, all 160, 150 games. If he's more of a bench player, that's fine. But what he did this year, and he's going to be easy to get into games because he plays everywhere. But what that player did this year, there's a reason why he was the player of the year. It's because the Marlins came in with this new era that you're talking about with Rachel and Gabe and Peter and all these people, and they wanted to really push players that they thought were really ready. And they saw something in Sanoja that I don't think any of us saw. I thought Sanoja was a decent utility player coming into the season. We had him ranked low-end top 30 maybe, I think, in our preseason. And he proved us all, pretty much to be the fact that he's a top 15 prospect in this organization. Even still after their, midseason trade deadline that they did, that guy proved us to be he proved to us that he is deserving of a major league spot. And they gave it to him, which is great. And of course, the Marlins being a 100-loss team, second time in franchise history that they've lost 100 games, they didn't have anything to lose by calling him up. But still, they started a clock on a 22-year-old player. I hope that this is the start of the Marlins, and I think that it is, and I hope that it is, them starting to say, hey, it doesn't matter about roster control. It doesn't matter about days on the roster. It doesn't matter about, saving your year of arbitration or whatever it is. We're going to call you up when we think that you're ready. They did it with Sanoja. I hope they do it with more players. And this guy's proving why their faith should be renewed in players that are ready right now, because this guy's been great. I think other than Thomas, which we know has a great major league future, I think we could see him as early as next year, Eli. Honestly, I think he's deserving of it. But we'll see what the Marlins decide to do with him. But yeah, he's been amazing. We talked to him. I wrote an article on him. Great guy, mature guy, all the talent in the world. I hope that Noble Meyer, who is growing up next to him, can kind of, and we know he has good stuff. I just think it's kind of the maturity level that needs to kind of rise a little bit with Noble. If he can get to Thomas's level, the Marlins will have two studs in that rotation for the long term, which is great. But every year on my birthday, I kind of remiss on the Marlins season that was. And this year, like last year, I was saying, okay, wow, they made the playoffs. Like everything's look to be pretty good. And this year we're kind of on the other opposite end of the spectrum where it's more about the future, which is okay. But I think the future is not as far away as some people may think.
This will depend a little on what happens with the player moving forward. But the Max Meyer fiasco is something that may stick with people's memories for a while. How outrageous it seemed in that moment to have him sent down to the minors after just 3 really great starts at the beginning of the year, to have him sent down to AAA to work on some things at a time where they didn't really have any rotation depth to replace him, for him to spend so much time in the minors and then to come back out the second half of the season and pitch really poorly. And he's actually hurt at this time. So it was injury on top of the insult that he even finished this year on the IL with a little shoulder concern. So it will depend where his career goes from here. If he puts it together as a starting pitcher and he turns out to be a long-term starter and has just a really productive career, then I think people will overlook that. If for whatever reason he doesn't find success there, and even as a reliever, even if he doesn't have a lot of success there, if he just never turns into a impactful big leaguer in any role, then I think people will point to that and say that whether it's physical or psychological, that the Marlins mishandled him and wasted a guy that was formerly the number 3 overall draft pick and somebody that was in that small sample already doing it well in the majors. That's a pretty wild story in that moment. And I think that was to a lot of people, even before the Arraez trade. That was a few weeks before the Arraez trade. And I think even then it rubbed so many people the wrong way.
Yeah, I think what we'll remember, honestly, like one of the things that I'll remember most, Eli, about this season is that they did some things that worked in terms of trades. Well, at least we hope so in terms of what they got back at the deadline. They did some things that we hope will work out. I think they swung some good trades. But at the beginning of the season, what most of the stuff that Peter Bendix did not work. Sixto Sanchez in the rotation didn't work. AJ Puck in the rotation, it didn't work. Tim Anderson, it didn't work. There's so many things that he did at the major league level to start this season that maybe he hoped would continue the Marlins in terms of being a perennial playoff candidate. They just didn't work. So I think that's the level. That right there is what I just said, the preseason stuff that he did this year that didn't really work. And yes, it's a new guy getting used to a new team, and he's a new guy in town, and there's new people here. I understand. But I think that's where a lot of fans' frustration lied, is that a lot of, or most of what he did on the major league side in the preseason it really spelled the doom for the Marlins. So I think that's where the Marlins will need to improve, especially with a year of familiarity under his belt. I think that's where Peter Bendix himself will admit that he needs to kind of improve as we go into 2025.
The Sixto storyline is another one that I think I'll remember for a while, just because of how highly regarded he was back in 2020, how good he was in 2020 when he was in the rotation, how he disappeared in a way that so few players have for 3 years, 3 full years, just being sidelined by shoulder-related issues and potentially just some work ethic-related issues, then resurfacing in spring training. I was in spring training. I made a quick visit and I saw him pitch in person, and he looked really good as a reliever. He ends up making the opening day roster, and then it really just didn't have any success whatsoever. Was probably on that roster a little bit too long, and then they essentially hit him on the phantom IL for the portion of the season. I know it irks Carver and probably some other people as well that we give so much attention to somebody that simply was not close to recapturing the player he used to be. How excited, Gabe, were you at various points, whether it was during spring training or when he made the team? Did you ever actually have any real expectations for Sixto turning it around and pulling off this really crazy comeback?
So I know that several people on the Fish on First crew, the expectations were quite low.
Yes.
But there was this thing in the back of my mind that I was just like, there's going to be like some crazy like come up story. Like this is going to be wild. And like, I'm on Twitter one day and I think it was Isaac said something about Sixto throwing 99 or 100 or something like that. Him coming into the dugout, everybody like shaking his hand and giving him hugs and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. But then after that, it was just kind of like, really, it was after spring training. Oh my gosh, it was a train wreck. And honestly, like from a purely like psychological and like human perspective, I feel for the guy. To like my 3 years of, like you're saying, being sidelined and whatever, to being at a point where you now have the opportunity again, and it's just bomb after bomb after bomb, and it's just not going well. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of tragic, honestly. It's tragic.
I think something else we should mention on a positive side, we may remember the Griffin Conine experience, him getting called up. You can speak on that, Carver, because as much as you admired his father for all the years he spent, and you covered Griffin very closely these last handful of years, we were pretty honest about how our expectations for him were relatively low. All of a sudden, there's opportunity just blows wide open for him with all the guys that traded away, with all the injuries they had on the hitting side. As we speak, I think he's starting this third to last game. He's been starting a lot, especially against right-handed pitching down the stretch, and he's been like a league average hitter. So I think that whole storyline of joining the Weathers, Ryan and David, as becoming just the second father-son duo to play for this team, and at least for now, I think at the very least, he has put himself in a very good position to be a part of 2025 in some form or fashion and have an actual major league career.
Yeah. I will say, picking up guys, I mean, I didn't even know this dude existed, Otto Lopez. I mean, aside from his slump, he was kind of, I have found him to be a great pickup. Finding little holes here and there, I feel like that's been kind of cool. None of it is we're not moving the needle necessarily, but I mean, we can recruit all the second basemen in the world. It's amazing, but we can't find a shortstop. That's a whole other podcast for another day, I guess.